Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little. We are nearing the end of this review of the bigger, or the big, whatever it is, the big or the bigger, one of the two, the big $5 tournament that CzechRaizor played. So far he's played great. I like the way he is thinking, and we're going to continue moving through this video. If you enjoy this type of content, definitely check out my interactive poker site over at pokercoaching.com. And also check out my books. You can find those at jonathanlittlepoker.com/books. They've been the highest rated and most popular books on Amazon for quite a while now. And if you're into learning about poker, you will like them, hopefully. You can check those out at jonathanlittlepoker.com/books.
Taking very hard and tough decisions how tight I should be as far as it comes to opening and selecting my opening range. So finally, a hand that I can play and feel comfortable playing. Alright, pocket kings in a big blind.
For those who are just now tuning in, I am finding that I typically open a little bit wider than CzechRaizor is accustomed to, and I'm also a little bit splashier. And I think that general strategy is going to lead to you either busting out earlier or making more very deep runs. Whereas I think this strategy just kind of waiting around for good hands, that's often going to lead to you making marginally deep runs, like taking a bunch of 18th places, for example. And you're not really going for 18th place. We're going for winning. And I think that if you get a little bit more aggressive and play, just be a little bit more active in general, you're going to catch the good side of variance from time to time, and that's going to allow you to win the tournament without having to go from having 20 big blinds to all the chips and only 60 hands.
About 13, 14 bigs, 7.6 M. Yeah. I think I should just shove it in. I should just jam in this board because there's still a short stack, and picking up 210k pre-flop is still very good, and it's not like 3-betting would look way weaker than shoving. I could call, but then yeah, I can see merit in calling. He's this play happy guy. But busting here would be pretty bad. So I decide to jam, which will cause him to fold quite often. But I'm taking max, well, for liquidity, max value when I run into like pocket 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, or any ace jack, ace 10, or any, top of his range. So that would be pretty good for me to take like 70-30. That's okay, but just flatting and taking this hand to the flop could cost me a large portion of my stack, and that would not be the best way to do in this situation with one 10 BB short or 11 BB short still in play. But again, not very clear.
So previously, this guy raised small blind, you jammed and he folded. You had ace 2. Shortly after that, you picked up king jack offsuit on the button. This guy opened the cutoff and you just folded. That's a spot where if you had shoved and he would have folded, and now we find ourselves here, I would now definitely shove. But given we have been very tight. I mean, notice your stats. I mean, I guess we can't really see all your stats, but you were playing pretty snugly at this final table. And given you've been pretty snug, I don't think you want to do this. I recognize you shoved the previous orbit on this guy, or maybe it was 2 or 3 orbits ago, but I don't think that's a good enough reason to shove in this scenario. I'm okay calling. I do recognize, as you said, that you will occasionally get yourself in a lot of trouble by calling, but notice you are effectively the short stack again. You have a long way to go to win this tournament. And I think if you shove, the guy is going to fold a ton. Again, remember, this guy is the player who's opening 67% of the time from the small blind. So this guy is going to be folding very, very frequently whenever you shove on him. So I would have flatted this one and taken the risk of getting a nasty flop. But even then, it's not like whenever the flop comes ace, queen, 9 that you just lose every time, right? So just be aware that even if the flop is kind of bad, it's not like you just lose every time.
3-betting to like 360, no, I do not like that. Should trigger alarm bells set with this guy, and he should play quite well. Unless he's POE, which I do not know. It's kind of play happy, but again, I think it's a shallow call.
I do agree that making it 360 there would look very, very strong. So I would either shove or call, but I think calling's just going to be better. Especially when you are the short stack or one of the short stacks. And again, here you are not that much higher than the player on your left before that hand started. You are not so concerned with just trying to outlast the guy. And also, I mean, you do move up a decent payout spot or a decent amount of money whenever you jump up the payouts, whenever you outlast Fred on your left. But at the same time, we are still trying to win the tournament. It's not like we are only playing for 4th or 5th place. And for that reason, I would have been a little bit more willing to see a flop and go from there. Also, calling with stuff like kings will let you call with more hands in the future, or just in general with your whole range, with a wider part of your range. So I don't mind calling in that spot.
Okay, last 50 hands played in this tournament. Let's see if it gets folded to me, and I share. And as you can see, and this is not a rare occasion, I still believed and thought I had full equity, and this guy folded like many times to a shove with 5, 6, 7 bigs. So this is a very clear shove. I can't raise fold anymore. I do not like stabbing because he could, at this point, he could shove some hands, and given the money in the pot, like the size of the antes, there's already 162k plus my small blind in the pot, and yeah, so basically given all this reasoning, I'm very leaning towards shoving, just leaning towards shoving. If I run 3.2 M, so for 3M I should be jamming 73% of hands, that's Jack X and 10 deuce suited, 10 6 off, and for 4M I should be jamming Jack deuce suited, Jack 5 off, so even for 4M it is a profitable Nash shove with somebody who calls Nash. That means 50. In his spot, he should be calling 55% of hands, and I cannot see him calling Jack 7 off, Jack 4 suited, 10 8 off, 9 7 suited, 9 8 off, and such and such and such. So he will be overfolding way too much, in my opinion. A very clear shove for these reasons.
Yep, I like the shove. We mentioned this earlier that you should be shoving incredibly wide into that guy, and nothing's changed. That's a spot where you can open, shove, I mean, probably any 2 cards. I don't think you even need to be so concerned with what break-even Nash shoving ranges are, because this guy is going to be folding way too often, even with a short stack. And so, knowing that, I think you can shove pretty wide.
Ace 8. Again, this is very close. Definitely plus EV, Nash shove, but now when he's down to like less than 5 bigs, and I'm facing very significant pay jump. Yep.
I like this fold. This is very similar to a hand from the previous part of this, where you're under the gun, 5-handed again. This guy's short. Wonder if you guys can hear the alarms outside. They're going off as if they're saying, fold, 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 fold. Yeah, you should definitely fold in this spot again, because the short stack is now, I believe, even shorter in terms of big blinds, and you're in roughly the same spot. So now, once you get up to 3 times the short stack, at this point, it does become worth it to play somewhat snug and just try to not go broke.
Time to do some homework. Time to do a lot of homework with Hold'em resources, or ICMizer, which I do not have, but I should. And so picking up where we left off for the last part.
So you mentioned ICMizer. You can actually check that out at jonathanlowpoker.com/ICM. That is a very good program for spots like that. And I'm pretty sure in that spot it's just going to say to fold. I do not think shoving's the best option, mainly because you're risking a lot of chips, and if you go broke, you are very, very unhappy.
Okay. If it's folded to me, it'll be quite interesting. Because on normal circumstances, I'm priced into call, and I have to call it off. Will be forced to call it off. But given his range and how tight this guy is going to be, okay, he's showing 2.5 M into 1, 2, 3, 4. So his Nash shoving range 2.5 into 4 should be 32%. Ace X, King 5 suited, King 9 off, Queen 8 suited, Queen 10 off, Jack 8 suited, Jack 10 off, and 10 8 suited. So
before you move forward with this thought, this guy's what a Nash shoving range is in this scenario is pretty irrelevant in my mind. This guy has been very tight, and I don't think he's to the short stack, or to such a short stack where he's just going to go all in with a very wide range, which would actually be much closer to Nash. I think this guy's probably still just going to be tight enough and not do anything ridiculous. So just be aware that just because he should be shoving a range does not mean he is shoving that range.
This range from the big blind is 62.6% call for me. Queen does suited, Queen 6 off, Jack 2 suited, Jack 8 off, and so on and so on. But he's a portion tighter than that, I believe. And also, once we switched positions, it's not too good. But at the same time, I just cannot give him the pot, because that would be a pretty bad thing for him, for me, if he wins this 162k without showdown. So I have to take a gamble. I have to go for it. I have to go with his hand, and it will be a pretty significant gain for me to win and get this elimination. Once I lose, I still get the shot. I can still double up, and I am still alive. So I have to take it. But I wonder what the minimum requirements are on whether I should be calling Nash, which means 62%, and calling hand as bad as 10-7 off, 7-6 off, 7-4 suited, 6-3 suited, 6-5 off. Should I be calling with these in this situation? Interesting question, I think.
I would definitely not be calling that tight versus this guy. I mean, maybe I'm just viewing this player as much tighter than you view him as. I mean, the guy hasn't put a chip in the pot, right? Given he has not put a chip in the pot, why would we think that he is all of a sudden bluffing? I recognize he's under the gun. Maybe that, and he's going to take the blind soon. So maybe you think that's going to make him lose his mind all of a sudden. But I would not be the least bit surprised if this guy just has a good hand. Queen 8 suited is probably good enough to call, but I'm certainly not calling 6-3 suited or Queen 6 off suited. I think that would be a pretty bad call in this scenario.
Oh, interesting. Puzzle solver, I guess.
It would probably be beneficial there to observe what the shover had, because if he showed up with just total garbage, like 9-4 offsuit, then certainly your strategy of calling with Nash would be much, much, much better. But if instead he shows up with ace jack or something like that, then that doesn't really tell us anything about his range at all. So always keep that in mind. I mean, you want to be seeing what the guy shows up with.
I'm down to 12 bigs, and again.
Also, we're not really trying to see if we don't really care when he shows up with the best part of his range. We really just care whenever he shows up with garbage, because there I'm pretty much folding because I assume he's never shoving garbage. But if he is shoving with garbage, well, then now all of a sudden my strategy is quite poor. But if we see him shove in the spot, let's say 10 times on average, or players who look exactly like him shoving 10 times in the spot, and they just show up with a good hand every time, then now my strategy of calling much tighter than is typically expected becomes much better.
And I'm just getting pretty much on point with this shot. I cannot really raise fold. I can't raise because I see this guy flatting very, very wide. He's playing 60-55 at this point. 3-betting a lot, 16%. So there's no way I can get away with opening this hand. It's 6M into 2 people. M6 into 2. Alright, so this is a clear mistake. This is a bad. This is going to be a bad shove, because I am not sure what I was doing, because I would usually consult or check with Nash shoving charts. Yeah, this is a bad shove. I mean, the very bottom is King 9 and or King 10. Yeah, especially given this scenario, if there's a big stack and a big blind, he could call me quite happily, and I'm still racing for another spot with this short stack. Even though he's tight, still it is a concern that he finds a hand. Overall, it is a bad spot to shove King 8 off. King 9 should have been very minimum King 8 suited, but I'll be happy with King 10.
I agree with this as well. You were probably... So one thing I've noticed that you do is that you start to open it up a bit after you think you've done something kind of tight. And I don't know if you thought that the previous hand was tight. Obviously it wasn't, because somebody called in between. But this is just something I'm observing. It seems like after you do something you perceive to be snug, you probably sit back and think, man, that was nitty. Now I'm going to take the very next spot that looks anywhere near reasonable. And the spot looks close enough to reasonable, so you took it. And like you said, this is just a little bit too wide. It's not insane. And actually, I don't really mind the shove because we know the guy in the small blind is going to probably call too tight. So knowing the guy in the small blind is going to call too tightly, you can shove wider. So it's almost as if you were shoving from the small blind in this hand. Of course, not completely because small blind's still there and he's not going to fold the top 10% of hands, but he could legitimately fold the top 20% of hands, between 10% and 20%. So this is a spot where I do not mind the shove because the player in the small blind's probably going to be so snug to the point that it becomes not so bad to shove this. I probably would have actually shoved in this spot as well. And one thing you keep referencing is Nash shove ranges. And Nash shove ranges assume your opponents are going to play optimally. And the vast majority of the time, you're going to find that your opponents play too tightly. Very few players are going to play too loosely or even call based on what Nash says. So I would definitely suggest you get away from that, especially in the small stakes games. As you move up to the higher stakes games where your opponents are going to call better, then perhaps it starts to become relevant. But, it's good to know these things, but you need to know when to deviate from them. And I think you've had some pretty clear spots to deviate from Nash, and I think this is actually one of them because it's almost like the small blind doesn't exist.
Yeah, it is. This is a bad shove. Yeah. 6.7, so let's say 7M into 3. I'm 7 into 3, king 10 off. But I felt like jumping two in a row might be too much, and I created a little bit of a bumper and distance between me and the short. So maybe that's the reason. I think that's the reason why I did not decide to shove here. And yeah. So I fold it, and he doesn't start shoving for me, and luckily, it doesn't matter what the board is, but I'm just concerned about the ranges. Unfortunately, the short stack shoves fours, pocket fours, and manages to hold with ace 7, and he doubles up. So now it's...
This king 10 offsuit shove would be very similar to the king 8 offsuit shove previously, but I actually think the king 8 offsuit shove on the previous hand was significantly better than shoving in this hand with king 10 offsuit, because now you have more chips and you're in a worse position. And also the player in the big blind is probably going to play reasonably well, or maybe even too loose given his stats. Whereas earlier we were against only one loose player in the big blind. If we shove in this hand, we're now against two loose players. So you're going to be way more likely to get called in this spot if you shove with king 10 compared to the previous hand, I think. So just be aware of that. I think that, again, it goes back to you being a little bit too concerned with what these break-even ranges are. And I don't think you need to be so concerned with that. I think you need to be more concerned with how are my opponents going to react versus me. And in this spot, I think that shoving would be a little bit too wide because, again, it is a little bit on the other side of profitable Nash shoving ranges, but also because now there are two players yet attacked who can conceivably call you.
Again, it's my turn to get involved, and I should be looking for good spots to get my stack in and try to double up or try to pick up blinds and NTs. This is not one of them. This is not one of them either. This could be it. Nope. Alright. Yeah.
If you see a lot of raising and 3-betting going on, you could start shoving pretty wide in that scenario. I think your hand was a little bit too weak, but if you get the vibe that these players are really fighting, or perhaps if these two players had different stack sizes, like maybe this guy had 5 million, this guy had 7 million, so the guy with 7 million should be attacking a lot, then you can consider getting out of line and re-raising a little bit more often, re-raising all in a little bit more often with stuff like King Jack and Ace 9 and whatnot. Assuming you think you have any fold equity. If you have no fold equity, then you probably just have to revert to having a pretty strong range because you are going to get called most of the time. And I like this Ace 3 shove.
This is a clear one. Very, very obvious one, obvious spot. So just a shove.
It's always good when they give you the obvious ones, but I like how you're always thinking about what is the bottom of my range here. What a lot of people do is they think about only the exact situation they are in. And, there's way more you can observe and study than only the exact situation you are in. So I definitely like the fact that you are always taking your time and always thinking about the worst hand you would make specific plays with. I think that's a trait that most good players have. Very few good players just think, all right, I have Ace 3 suited, what do I do? It's more so, okay, what do I do with all of my range? And I definitely like how you are doing that.